This stress-free moment's brought to you by Lewis Jewelers. Thank you to all the frontline and essential workers that have made it possible for Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor to open again.
Welcome to the Maize and Blue Breakdown, the Wolverine.com podcast. I am Clayton Sayfie with Austin Fox here on Michigan State Week. The Wolverines coming off of a 49-24 victory at Minnesota, ranked Minnesota. Austin, Jim Harbaugh has not beaten a ranked team on the road in like 5-6 days. So you got to get the national media. We got to get the Paul Feinbaum types to start talking about that. But, man, an impressive win from Michigan over the weekend. Michigan State falling to Rutgers, which I predicted last week on the show. Credit to me. But overall, a good weekend for football fans in the state of Michigan. The Lions with a thrilling win over the Falcons. Michigan looking really, really good on Saturday night in front of the entire country. The highest-rated game that ESPN or ABC has put on this college football season. So you get 2 out of 3, not bad. Even Michigan State fans can admit, not bad there. Michigan winning, Detroit winning, a good weekend.
Yeah, it was an all-around good weekend. And on top of that, you got the MAC kicking off here pretty quick. So we'll get CMU and Western and Eastern Michigan playing football again. So that's something to look forward to. It was an all-around great weekend if you're a Michigan fan. It was a dominant performance that they put in that the whole country watched. Like you said, viewership was through the roof, the highest watch game on the ESPN, ABC family of networks that they've had all year. Joe Milton is really capturing a lot of the country's attention. Analysts all across the country are talking about him. Fox college football analyst Joel Klatt had nothing but praise for him and Jim Harbaugh and this Michigan team so far this year yesterday. So it's really exciting to think about what this Michigan team could be this year. I don't want to overreact too much to one game, but so far so good, man. And I wouldn't be surprised if that upward trajectory continues this Saturday against Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Michigan's going to have a heck of a chance to win and win big in this game. They're 25-point favorites over Michigan State. Coach Mel Tucker, in his first little taste of the rivalry as the Michigan State head coach. He was a graduate assistant back in the late 90s under Nick Saban. But we will get into that. First, we'll talk a little bit more about Michigan's win over Minnesota. We'll talk about Michigan State. We'll get our college football picks, and then at the end, some over-unders, as always, here during college football season. We had some good ones. They were really close. Credit to me again. I'm just giving myself credit, but, man, whoever set those over-under lines on some of those stats last week did a heck of a job. So, again, hand up. Credit to me.
Patting yourself a little bit on the back there, aren't you?
Absolutely. You got to be able to, and I'm patting myself on the back once again for that Rutgers pick. But before we get into this Minnesota game and recap a little bit, what we liked about this game, what we didn't like, maybe a couple things that Michigan needs to work on, we'll remind you to head over to thewolverine.com and use the promo code BLUE60 to get 2 months of our premium content for free. So do it right now. That'll last you through the good majority of football season here. All the way until late December. So use the promo code BLUE60. You get 60 days of the premium content for free. We're churning it out over at thewolverine.com. Austin, you just put up an opponent preview on Michigan State. You got insight from a Michigan State writer. You got the whole depth chart up, so really good stuff there. That's for our premium subscribers to view at thewolverine.com, so check that out. But let's get into this Minnesota game. Like I said, 49-24, Michigan win. The most impressive part for me on offense was probably just the game plan in general, game planning for a first-year, or not a first-year quarterback, but a first-year starting quarterback. The plays they ran, the things that they did for him to get him comfortable in that offense. They took a couple deep shots, didn't really hit on many of them, but it was really the short passes, the things that we talked about last week that Joe Milton's going to have to do really well, just the simple stuff, and then worry about everything else after that. He did that, and he looks primed to really lead this Michigan offense, a prolific Michigan offense so far this season. It looks like the ceiling is a lot higher than maybe some people would have thought coming into this year. So really, really impressive, and I really like what Joe Milton brought to the table. What were your offensive takeaways from this game?
It's got to be all about Joe Milton. That's where it starts with me as well. He completed 15 of his 22 passes at 68.1%, and Shea Patterson only did that twice in a game all of last year. So I was really skeptical about Joe Milton coming into this one. I thought there would be growing pains, and he would struggle at times with accuracy and leading this offense, and that never really happened on Saturday night. Michigan only punted or attempted to punt one time, and that was on their opening series, and that was obviously blocked. So Michigan's offense was really effective the entire night in this one. They put up 481 yards on what was a really good Minnesota defense last year. I also like the rushing attack. Hassan Haskins and Zach Charbonnet both ran for at least 70 yards, and they rotated backs like crazy. 3 of the 4 backs they played found the end zone. Ronnie Bell stepped up. He had 74 yards in this one, last year's leading receiver. So there were a lot of good things to like in this one. The offensive line as well, with 4 new starters on it, a revamped offensive line, really didn't have any growing pains in this one. They blocked well all game long in the run blocking department and in the pass protection department. They only gave up 3 tackles for loss and 1 sack, and you could make the case that that sack could be blamed on Milton. So Ed Warner has been tabbed as one of the best in the business up front, Michigan's offensive line coach, and he proved why once again on Saturday night. But again, it all comes down to Joe Milton in this one. He was calm, cool, he was poised throughout this one. He was confident, and it showed. And it's obvious that his teammates loved him. They raved about him after the game. Ben Mason, Michigan's senior tight end, fullback, had nothing but good things to say about him. And this guy is a heck of a leader, man. And that's something that I think Shea Patterson lacked at times the past 2 years. His teammates respect him like crazy, and they want to play for him. And we've heard all offseason that this is a closer Michigan team than what they've had in recent years. They got out some of the guys with bad attitudes, and this is really a connected unit, and that's what you have to be if you want to win at the highest level. So I'm trying not to overreact too much to the Minnesota game, but it's hard not to be excited about this Michigan offense moving forward.
Cool as a cucumber was how Jim Harbaugh described Joe Milton on Saturday night, and I agree. And you watch his feet. He was comfortable in the pocket. He said that's the best thing he did well, was stay in the pocket, trust his offensive line, something that he said coming out of high school was his biggest weakness, was, maybe wanting to have that happy feet and move outside the pocket a little too early. We saw, honestly, that with Shea Patterson quite a bit in his 2 years at Michigan. We didn't see much of it from Joe Milton at all. And another thing I wanted to mention was just the way he ran the football. He falls forward, gets an extra couple of yards on each and every run. You saw it at the goal line there with the touchdown. And I tweeted this during the game. Some of those quarterback powers they're running, first of all, it's textbook Jim Harbaugh, Ed Warner type of running plays. But it's also what Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator in New England, is doing with Cam Newton. Now, I know Cam Newton didn't have a great game last week, but some of the running plays that they've been running with him are exactly carbon copies. And I guess you could say some of the running plays Michigan was running are carbon copies of what New England's been running with Cam Newton. So keep an eye on that. Him in the running game is going to be a huge plus, and they look willing to be able to call those design runs. Give it up for Josh Gaddis and the way he has evolved this offense. Last year, I think that, going with the full spread look and, having those growing pains at times and having a really tough start to the season really set them back. They finally started to click towards the end of last year, but they were kind of in conflict of what they wanted to be, because you saw mid-year the change maybe to some more of those like pin and pull type plays and traps and, the powers that Jim Harbaugh likes to run, because the running game wasn't up to snuff. But this year, with the addition of Ben Mason playing a full-time role on offense, he played 45, I believe, of the 56 offensive snaps, and he was the player of the game along with the rest of the running backs. He was incredible. They have morphed this offense into a power spread attack. You saw it in the run game. You saw what they could do with some of the passing schemes. So give it up to Josh Gaddis. Jim Harbaugh gave him a ton of credit on his radio show this week, and I agree with him. Called a hell of a game on Saturday night and really had a heck of a game plan as well. So hats off to Josh Gaddis for his game plan, for what he was able to do with the quarterback making his first start. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. The obvious concern from this game was the rush defense, allowing Mohamed Ibrahim, who's a really good running back, by the way, so you got to credit him quite a bit. But you allowed him to rush for 140 yards on 26 carries. He had a couple touchdowns. Had too much success, but at the same time, Aiden Hutchinson said they were really playing the pass the entire second half and kind of pinning their ears back, and maybe they lost contain on a couple plays or didn't come up as quickly as they would have liked to or normally would have if they expected a run coming. Who knows how much of that was just kind of, him maybe rationalizing a little bit. I will say for Aiden Hutchinson, he took on quite a few double teams in this game. So the rush defense, a little bit of a concern, but you said it with the positives. You don't want to overreact to 1 week. I don't want to overreact to 1 week on some of the negatives with the rush defense. I think they had some things to shore up. I think Cam McGrone could have played a better game filling some holes, but overall a decent defensive performance. He allowed 24 points. One of those touchdowns was on a short field. Defensive secondary, my next takeaway would be Jamon Green looked like the best corner on the field, and hats off to you, Austin Fox. I'll pat you on the back a little bit and, basically point out how you've been harping the praises of Mike Zordich throughout the offseason and his ability to develop corners. He developed Jamon Green. I'm a little worried about Vince Gray back there, but we know that he's, at the very least a solid player and should be, playing better as the season goes on. But man, a lot to like about the defense. Some things they still need to work on, and that means they'll be even more motivated this week, I think, to come out and make a statement against Michigan State.
Yeah, when I think it was all said and done, it was a pretty solid defensive performance on Saturday at Minnesota. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. The run defense is a little bit of a concern, but I think that the defensive ends and the linebackers are going to be solid all year long, and the concern lies with the interior. Guys like Carlo Kemp and Chris Hinton and Donovan Jeter, you know what you're going to get with Kemp, but you need another defensive tackle or two to step up and play at a high level. And I think that could be Hinton or Jeter. I don't think they're quite there yet, but fortunately for Michigan, they aren't necessarily facing many power rushing attacks between now and Ohio State. When considering that Wisconsin doesn't have Jonathan Taylor anymore, Wisconsin ran all over that Michigan defense last year on September 21st during their 35-14 win, and Michigan's defense really didn't have any answers for them. But again, Taylor's in the NFL now, and Nakia Watson and Garrett Groshek, Wisconsin's new running backs, don't exactly scare you the way Jonathan Taylor did. And then Penn State doesn't have that power rushing attack either, with Noah Cain and Journey Brown out for the year, and Indiana certainly doesn't have it either. So between now and December 12th, when Michigan plays Ohio State, I expect that front seven to make a ton of improvement and really be an elite unit by the time we do get to that Ohio State game. The secondary played well against Minnesota. Rashad Bateman did have 101 yards, but he only averaged 11 yards a catch. So Michigan's defensive backs did a good job of not allowing him to break off the big plays and beat him over the top. He averaged 20 yards per catch last year, which led the entire Big Ten. So he's is as explosive as it gets from a Big Ten receiver standpoint. I thought Jamon Green, Vincent Gray, Brad Hawkins, and Daxton Hill, when he was in the game, all performed very well. Hill obviously got hurt, and that allowed freshman safety Makari Page to play 52 snaps on Saturday night. He really got his feet wet. He's from the Detroit area, of course, so that was pretty good to see him step in, and Michigan's defense really didn't miss a beat when he was in the game. So all in all, I thought it was a very solid performance. I expect them to continue to get better throughout the year, just as they did for much of last year following that Wisconsin blowout. And like you said, hats off to Mike Zordich, man, the cornerbacks coach. He just continues to grind out quality cornerback after quality cornerback. And it looks like we're going to see that once again this year with another solid duo in Vincent Gray and Jamon Green.
You mentioned Makari Page getting some run there. Yeah, he played 52 snaps. He did struggle, though, quite a bit. He was kind of on skates. There was one, I know he got his feet tripped up a little bit. The loss of Dax Hill, I think, was huge in that secondary. But like you said, the defense really stepped up and did everything that they could without him. He's going to be huge going forward. You don't necessarily need him against Michigan State, but you would like to see him back before they get Wisconsin the next week. And we'll talk about we can talk about Wisconsin a little bit later and what's going on there with their game against Nebraska being canceled. And obviously then that kind of creeps in the back of your mind that Michigan may not play them in a couple weeks. I would still expect them to, but man, I mean, Dax Hill, from everything we've heard, it's not a serious injury. So, there's a very, very good chance that he plays on Saturday. But overall from that defense, like you said, they shore a couple things up. And again, we're just going off of one game, so it's a small sample size, but they shore a couple things up. Again, you mentioned the interior of the defensive line. That's obviously a concern. And I thought the linebackers didn't flow quite as well as they should have. I thought Dax Hill did a great job coming downhill earlier in the game, had a huge hit. So they missed that aspect of it. So when they're at full strength, we'll see what they are. We have to mention Michael Barrett. At least I didn't mention him when I was talking about the defense. What a night for that kid. And he was thrown up on the field too. Apparently he wasn't sick. It was just kind of like nerves, or that's just kind of what he does. Josh Ross says it's happened before, but what a night for that kid. A 66-yard not a touchdown, but a kick return that set up a touchdown. You had the forced fumble. Of course, Donovan Jeter scoring the touchdown. Game ball goes to Michael Barrett. One of the game balls, especially on defense, has to go to him. So hats off to him. And we saw a ton of guys, Austin, that made their first starts, made their first mark on this Michigan football program and impressed. It goes from Joe Milton all the way down, to guys like Michael Barrett who were making their first start, guys like Blake Corum, the freshman running back who was making his first start. First play of the game, they run to him on a little swing pass, picks up 24 yards. So there is some talent on this Michigan roster that's young, but down the road and even later this season, we're going to see a lot of it start to, get even better.
Hats off to Michael Barrett, man. Michigan's redshirt sophomore Viper barfing on the sidelines. Like you said, we asked him about it after the game, and he just started laughing. When he said, yeah, I puked on the sidelines, basically shrugged it off like it was no big deal. This guy was a high school quarterback down in Valdosta, Georgia. Lowndes High School. He was a jack of all trades at Michigan. People often say a jack of all trades, but a master of none, but that's not the case with this kid. He bounced around from kick returner to wide receiver. Some people thought he might even be a running back at Michigan, but he's finally found a home at Viper on Michigan's defense. And like you said, he made a huge, huge impact. He laid the wood on Tanner Morgan on that sack, man. That ball went flying out of his hands. Donovan Jeter, another guy who obviously ran that fumble back, had a big impact in what was kind of his first extensive game action. He hadn't played much defensively in the past at Michigan. A lot of guys on offense made their first career start. Fifth-year senior Andrew Vistardis at center, redshirt junior Chuck Filiaga at left guard, the freshman, obviously. Roman Wilson at receiver, Blake Corum at running back. A.J. Henning caught a pass and showed off his speed in the passing game. This Michigan team is young at a few spots, but man, you talked about it, but they sure are talented, and it's exciting for the future when thinking about how talented some of these freshmen and redshirt freshmen and sophomores are on this team.
The last thing about this game from me was what you just talked about with the offensive line and how impressive it was. It might have been the most impressive offensive line performance by a Michigan team I've seen in a while. You could, put maybe the Notre Dame game up there from last year and put a couple games up there, but considering the circumstances of replacing 4 guys that went to the NFL, having guys step in and then show that they can actually do a ton of things. They weren't keeping it simple in the run game. You saw Andrew Vistardis outside wide pulling. You saw even big Chuck Filiaga, who's just a massive human being in there at left guard pulling. So they weren't just running the simple schemes for these guys. Considering all the circumstances, this was one of the most impressive offensive line performances I've seen in a while from a Michigan football team. So another game ball goes to all the big heavies, the guys in the trenches on Michigan's offensive line, and they really impressed some people. There was a question marks coming into the season. The O-line's one of them. That's one example, but Michigan answered a lot of questions on Saturday night, and they got to keep it going here against Michigan State. The arch rival comes in off of a loss to Rutgers. Rutgers' first win in 22 tries in the Big Ten play. So they had not won a Big Ten game since 2017. I will say this looks like a different Rutgers team. It's not the Rutgers of last year. Greg Schiano seemed to do a pretty good job there of bringing in the transfers, getting guys in right away. Guys like Brendan White, a defensive back from Ohio State. Guys like defensive tackle Michael Dwumfor from Michigan, of course. And others, but including the quarterback. So this is a different Rutgers team, but still, it's Rutgers. They had the R on their helmet. They were wearing the whatever their colors are, red and white. This was Rutgers. This is a bad loss for Mel Tucker. And Michigan State didn't show me a ton. The turnovers, they had 7 of those. I mean, you're not going to win any games. I guess, Austin, I saw the stat you did. Technically, the only other game, the last game they turned it over 7 times in, they won back in 1981. That is the Michigan State over Minnesota. But you're not going to win many games doing that. And obviously it's a statistical anomaly that they'll do it again this week. So Michigan's going to have to beat them in other ways, but I suspect it'll be not too big of a challenge to do so.
So are you trying to say that this was a bad loss for MSU last weekend? That's kind of the vibe I was getting from you, at least on this one. This was about as embarrassing as it gets if you're an MSU fan. Rutgers has been the doormat of the Big Ten ever since they joined, or at least ever since 2015 or so. And really, they led that entire game. They jumped off to a lead right off the bat, and they outplayed MSU for a lot of that game. I honestly couldn't believe how poorly MSU played. I expected much more from them. Obviously, it was Mel Tucker and that entire coaching staff's first game, but regardless, they are still more significantly talented than Rutgers, or at least we all thought they were, and it certainly didn't play out that way. You talked about the talented transfers that Rutgers has gotten from around the Big Ten. Brendan White at safety from Ohio State, and Drew Singleton and Michael Domfor from Michigan on defense, and Noah Vedral at quarterback, and even Aaron Cruikshank at receiver from Wisconsin. But regardless, man, this is still a Rutgers team that has just been atrocious over the last 5 years or so, and literally has not been able to win a game over the past 3 seasons. And yet they went on the road, beat up on this MSU team. You look at the final box score, and MSU outgained them 369 to 276. But again, it doesn't matter. If you turn the ball over 7 times, guys were fumbling left and right in this one. It wasn't just 1 or 2 guys. Receivers were fumbling. Jaden Reed, the transfer from Western Michigan, had 2 fumbles. Rocky Lombardi at quarterback had a fumble. He also threw 2 picks. His actual overall stat line wasn't that bad outside of his 3 turnovers. He went 31 of 43 for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns. And really, I think that's how MSU is going to have to try and compete with Michigan on Saturday if they want to try and keep this thing close. I think they have to air it out. Lombardi has to have the game of his life if they want to keep it close at the Big House on Saturday. They were not able to run the ball on Rutgers one bit. Jordan Simmons, the freshman running back, ran for 43 yards, and he was their leading rusher, but he only averaged 3.1 yards per carry. Again, this is against a Rutgers run defense that has been terrible in recent years. MSU finished with 50 rushing yards on the day and averaged 1.3 yards per rush. That's obviously as bad as it gets. So I expect this Michigan defense to really have a field day on Saturday and absolutely smother an MSU offense that looks incompetent right now.
Yeah, I've got Michigan winning really big in this game, and you just mentioned one of the reasons why the run game for Michigan State. As much as we can talk about the struggles that Michigan may have had stopping the run against Minnesota, that's Michigan against Minnesota. This was Rutgers absolutely stuffing Michigan State. So Michigan's run defense, this may be the perfect storm for Michigan to really blow Michigan State out and have this thing snowball on them, because this is a Michigan run defense that has received criticism, probably in-house, but we know from people like us, and saying you allowed too much against Minnesota at the very least. No one's upset, but this is a Michigan run defense that probably has something to prove this week against a Michigan State run offense that looked like they could barely muster anything up against Rutgers. If that's the case again, if they rush for 1.3 yards per carry against Michigan, it is going to be a long day, because then we're going to know that Rocky Lombardi is going to be throwing, and then Michigan is going to pin their ears back with guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Kwity Paye. We saw a blindside hit, from Michael Barrett where Tanner Morgan just didn't even see it. It wasn't even on his blind side, actually. It was on his coming from Tanner Morgan's right side, but beautifully timed up blitz where Michael Barrett was lined up out of the slot, and that forced the fumble. So this could be the perfect storm if Michigan's able to stuff that run defense or run offense of Michigan State, and then you make Rocky Lombardi throw the ball all over the yard. And I do have an over-under at the end, Austin, about how many turnovers Michigan State's going to have this week, so we can talk about that then. But I think things could really snowball that way. What needs to happen for Michigan to win this game by 50 plus? And then we'll talk about what needs to happen. Maybe you kind of mentioned some things there. Rocky Lombardi would have to play the game of his life if Michigan State wanted to even keep it close here. But we can get into that after this. What does Michigan need to do, or what is Michigan State going to do that would allow Michigan to win by 50 plus?
Simply get off the bus and be focused and not complacent in this one. I really think that if Michigan is dialed in and locked in and wants to put out a beatdown on MSU, then absolutely are capable of doing so. A final score of 55-3 or 58-7 or something like that, I really don't think is out of the question when considering the way these two teams played last weekend. If Michigan does not turn the ball over at all in this one, and again is dialed in and focused and doesn't give up big plays on defense, then we might just see a final score of 55-3 or 60-7 or something like I just mentioned. They put up 49 last week on a pretty good Minnesota team, so it's exciting to think about what they can do this week on a very bad MSU team. I really don't think complacency is going to be an issue with this Michigan team. They know they're heavy favorites, and they know that MSU looked really, really bad last week, but I really think the pregame shenanigans at MSU in 2018 open the Michigan football players' eyes and open Jim Harbaugh's eyes to this rivalry and what it's about and what MSU's program is about. I'll never forget that Monday press conference at Schembechler Hall. I was sitting about 10 feet away from Jim Harbaugh, and he was just about as fired up as I'd ever seen him in a media setting. And he said, I'll use Coach D'Antonio's own words against them. It's not a product of their team, but a product of their program, basically talking about the kind of program that he thinks MSU is. So again, ever since then, I think that Harbaugh really, really wants to lay the wood on MSU. We saw that late in last year's game when Michigan was up 37-10 with only 2 minutes left, and Shea Patterson throws about a 40-yard touchdown to Cornelius Johnson. That basically was the icing on the cake. If you're a Michigan fan, sealed the 44-10 win, and I wouldn't be surprised if Harbaugh keeps his foot on the gas once again this Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question that they're going to come out and try to put up as many points and try to shut Michigan State out. Easier said than done. But the fact that we're even really talking about how Michigan just needs to get off the bus and Michigan needs to just play decently focused to win this game by a lot of points, I think speaks to maybe just the way this rivalry has gone. I will give Mel Tucker a little bit of a break here because he came in February. They're coming off of the coach that had the best career out of any Michigan State head coach. He's the winningest head coach in program history. You would think he would have left them with more, but this is the first couple of years of the Tucker era. This is Mark D'Antonio's legacy. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, D'Antonio left this program in an absolute mess, and he deserves a ton of this blame, whether it's the personnel or the lack thereof that MSU has on this team. I really think he was looking to get a paycheck out of that, and that was the main reason for him leaving when he did. He really set this program back by leaving this past winter at a horrible time for this MSU program. When you look at their coaching search, they obviously struggled mightily, whether it was Luke Fickell at Cincinnati or Pat Narduzzi at Pittsburgh. Nobody wanted to take this job. And then they settled for Mel Tucker and made him one of the highest paid coaches in all of college football, even though it's pretty obvious that he's not deserving of that. But yeah, you're spot on when you say that Mark D'Antonio deserves a lot of blame for this. And I think that he tarnished his own legacy at MSU by screwing the program over the way he did.
Yep, and then I'll talk about how Michigan State could possibly make this game close. I think it's possible, and we kind of talked about it with Rocky Lombardi playing the game of his life. I do think they have a couple of weapons on the outside that I actually don't think are bad players. And Jaden Reed, the Western Michigan transfer who had 11 catches for 128 yards and a couple scores. I know he fumbled twice last week, but he actually looked pretty good, pretty dynamic. And then Jalen Naylor, 6 catches, 84 yards, 1 touchdown for them last week. Again, this is going up against Rutgers, but those guys actually impressed me watching that game. Elijah Collins was the Big Ten's top returning rusher coming into the year, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on with him, whether he just didn't have a good camp, maybe he's a little banged up, maybe he doesn't have the right attitude that Mel Tucker wants when he's trying to build this program, but he didn't play a ton against Rutgers, only had 9 carries for 3 yards. Didn't play well, so I mean that might be part of it too. But you mentioned Jordan Simmons, the running back on their team, who got the most run, the true freshman. So this is a reeling Michigan State team. You look at their, I'm looking at the box score right now from that Rutgers game, and nothing really jumps off the page other than Rocky Lombardi, who did impress me during that game more, considering the expectations I had for him and what I'd seen from him, a kid who had completed under 50% of his passes and had thrown more touchdowns coming into the season. I will give him credit. It looks like he's improved quite a bit this year, but it's nothing that scares a Michigan defense, especially one that just went up against Tanner Morgan and Rashad Bateman and those guys from Minnesota, who really were prolific last year for, PJ Fleck and that Minnesota offense. So I think it's going to be a big Michigan win. At the same time, I do think there is some pause there if you don't have a Dax Hill, and maybe they do connect on a couple big plays to some of those weapons like Reed and Naylor that I talked about. But man, I mean, I'm excited to see your score prediction, Austin, tomorrow at thewolverine.com with Chris Ballas's staff picks column. I have mine already in. I will not reveal it until that, but I think Michigan fans will, let's say if Michigan wins big, I don't think I'm going to be the one Michigan fans are coming after. I'll say that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you like that.
No, I was going to ask if you have any hints on yours.
You know what? I'm not going to give away any hints quite yet for simply one reason, because I want people to read the Wolverine.com's staff picks article on Friday that Chris Ballas puts out, because last week he had one of the most epic staff picks article that I've ever seen. We discussed 200-pound pigs in it. We discussed Busch Light. We discussed the Westphalia Town Fair that doesn't exist, but that doesn't matter. We discussed ham dinners and EJ Holland, our recruiting guy, apparently holding 200 cats hostage in his basement, which you can adopt if you call 1-800-KITTY-CAT. So, and again, these are Chris Ballas's words, not mine. So I really think that the staff picks article this Friday is worth reading into. So it's really a can't miss segment that we do on our website every Friday for anyone who's interested in getting a good laugh prior to Michigan's game every weekend.
And I cannot wait till tomorrow's. He'll go in on Michigan State. Let's just say that. I don't know what he has in store, but I know last year's was pretty funny, and it ended up over in some Michigan State circles, and not too many people were happy about it because he likes to poke a little fun, and it's all in good fun about the opponent. So make sure to check that out and check out our picks on there at thewolverine.com.
Yeah, Ballas is going to have an absolute field day with this staff picks article tomorrow. There's no question about it. We're going to see famous quotes like, "Where's the threat?" and "We're lying in the weeds," and "Pride comes before the fall." All famous MSU lines that Mark D'Antonio has used since he got there in 2007. On a fairly serious note, MSU has oftentimes kept this rivalry closer than expected with Michigan simply because of the hatred and the intensity that they bring to this one, specifically the years that Mark D'Antonio was there, when he instilled an unhealthy hatred in Michigan State players in the way they view Michigan. So it's happened all throughout history as well. Bo Schembechler, some of his teams struggled with lesser MSU teams. The 2016 Michigan State game could be used as an example. That was only a 9-point win. 2004, the triple overtime game at Michigan Stadium. That could be another example, a lesser MSU squad. So we've seen it before. But, man, I think that emotion and intensity and hatred can only get you so far. And at some point, you simply have to have the talent as well if you want to compete with a team who is heads and tails better than you and actually come out on top. And I don't think MSU has the talent to do that this week.
And I'll say this about Mark D'Antonio. He had the formula for the chip on the shoulder, the hatred, whatever you want to call it, lying in the weeds, that type of stuff. He had the formula. We'll see. We're going to learn a little bit here about Mel Tucker in terms of, what he's going to be able to do against a team like Michigan, against the elite teams on the schedule. I know we, might not reflect in the final score, but we'll see what kind of fight they have, and we'll see maybe when he does get a little more talent in his program. I know he's not recruiting well, but once he gets some more talent in there, what his teams will look like in terms of the fight that they're going to have. So we will see on that. And Mark D'Antonio, man, you mentioned it. That's why I'm not ruling out a Michigan State, lost by like 17 points, 14 points, 7 points. I mean, I wouldn't totally rule it out. I'd put the percentages pretty low on it, but Mark D'Antonio teams covered the spread against Michigan 10 out of 13 times, meaning they kept it closer in games that they lost and were predicted to lose in than expected. And they won by more when they were predicted to win than they were projected to win by. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, not just in the win-loss column for each team, but exactly what goes on during this game, how it transpires. We'll talk here right now about our favorite Michigan State memories in this rivalry. Before we do that, we will let you know that this podcast is brought to you in part by Jfq Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there's never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 5-star reviews. Give Josh Yoder a call today at 480-378-0498 or email Josh directly at jyoder@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending Incorporated, equal access lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. Austin, your favorite Michigan State memories. There's been some good ones. There's been the Halloween clash back in 2004. We're getting another Halloween one here. For me personally, one of my favorites was going to Michigan State in 2016, watching a Michigan team really manhandle Michigan State. Although the final score was a little closer than expected with a backdoor touchdown there by Michigan State. That was a fun one just simply because I was there hanging out with some good friends.
Yeah, that's not a bad choice at all. I've been thinking about this a lot this week and what my favorite game in this rivalry is. And honestly, I can't really settle on just one. There are several options. Last year's 44-10 win at the Big House was a lot of fun. I talked about Patterson's late touchdown to Johnson with only 2 minutes left, and that really was the icing on the cake to seal the 44-10 win. The 2018 game might top my list, though, at East Lansing. I was at that game with some coworkers, and as we were walking into the stadium about an hour or two before kickoff, we started getting word that there had basically been a little scuffle down on the field and that Lavert Hill had his headphones ripped off and Cleek Hudson and Lawrence Marshall were clotheslined. And then right about that time, that's when Fox and ESPN started covering it. And then we see Devin Bush out at midfield tearing up the Spartan logo. So that game really had a little bit of everything. You had the crazy weather with the hail and the snow even at one point and 60-degree sunshine before kickoff. So that was one of the weirdest games I've ever been to. It resulted in a 21-7 Michigan win. That one was awesome. 2012 was a lot of fun. I was at that one with my dad. Michigan won on a 12-10 walk-off field goal from Brendan Gibbons. It was the 900th win in school history, which of course was and still is the most in college football history. So that one was special. 2004, I think, is one that a lot of Michigan fans will say is their favorite in this rivalry's history. Braylon Edwards went off at the end of this one. It was triple overtime. Michigan was down 27-10 midway through the fourth quarter and wound up winning 45-37. Edwards stepped up and made big play after big play, specifically in the overtime sessions. So that one was a classic. How about 2002, man? A 49-3 beatdown at the Big House for Lloyd Carr's team. I know a lot of people like the thrilling wins, but you got to love a good old-fashioned beatdown as well. 2000 was a 14-0 shutout at the Big House on an absolutely beautiful day. Drew Henson was Michigan's quarterback in that one. And then the last game I'll touch on is 1997. And that, of course, was the 23-7 win in East Lansing. And the iconic play from that one was Charles Woodson's one-handed interception along the sideline. John U. Bacon is a New York Times bestselling author, one of college football's best historians. And he said that he's never quite seen a play like that. When Woodson picked that ball off, I don't think anybody could actually believe that he intercepted it. So that was just really one of his iconic moments on his way to winning the Heisman that year. But as for the rivalry as a whole, this isn't Michigan's top rivalry game. It never has been, and it never will be. That'll always be Ohio State. But this is still a pretty darn cool rivalry. And just looking back at the history of this game, we've had a ton of special moments. And I think from a Michigan standpoint, we're going to have another fun one to add to this chapter on Saturday afternoon at the Big House.
If Michigan wins this game, they will have double the amount of wins against Michigan State in the series history. It just shows you just how dominant the Wolverines have been, even after a rough patch there.
Yeah, there's no question. They've absolutely owned this series throughout the rivalry's history. MSU won 6 out of 7 from 2008 to 2015, but in the grand scheme of things, that was really just a blip on the radar. I believe Michigan leads the all-time series 76-35-4, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been absolute domination. I don't think Michigan will pick up their biggest margin of victory ever on Saturday. Fielding Yost owns that one back in 1902 when he beat MSU 119-0. That was his point-a-minute crew. So unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see that margin topped, but there's been several beatdowns in this one. Michigan has won by 50 or more points, I believe, 4 times in the rivalry's history. They've won by 34 or more 6 times since World War II ended, and I think that we might see number 7 on Saturday afternoon if Michigan comes out focused and ready to play, which I fully expect them to do.
Okay, so I think my stat was wrong then. Maybe it's if Michigan wins, that they're going to have more than half of, like, they're going to have won more than half of the games they've played, including the ties. Where's my math? I saw it off of a tweet, so I don't know.
I was going off the top of my head on the all-time series, so I could be mistaken on that one as well. I know it's close to the number I threw out, but it may not be exactly correct.
Okay, I'm looking it up right now. As
Don't
we go along.
Don't ask me to do any math on this podcast. Anyone who knows me knows I suck at math, and that simple addition was never my strong suit.
You were wrong, but I don't blame you because it was tough, and I didn't know off the top of my head. Michigan leads 71-36-5. And as a trophy game, a little closer, 38-27-2. Two ties there. So, man, I mean, this could be doubling them up here. If my math would be correct there, right?
I don't know. I don't have a calculator. I think it's obvious that we both suck at math, and I think that we should never be asked to do any math problems ever again on this podcast.
Yeah, it'd be doubling up the wins. I was kidding. I know the math. 36 times 2. There we go. It'd be 72-36 and 5 ties. So, yep, there we go. There's your stat of the week. Michigan can double the win total in this rivalry against Michigan State. Let's talk about the rest of the Big Ten really quickly, get some of our college football picks. We'll start with, the Wisconsin-Nebraska game being canceled. And this has kind of been a point of controversy. Of course, now Nebraska has petitioned to try to play Chattanooga FCS team this weekend. The Big Ten blocked it, which, whatever. I mean, Nebraska's in their own world. At the same time, I feel for them because Wisconsin, I read their statement yesterday. I was like, okay, how many positive tests do they have? I go onto their website. I look at the statement from Paul Christ in the football program, and it says that the decision was made by Barry Alvarez, their athletic director, and the university president to cancel the game. They didn't have over the 5% positivity rate over the 3-day rolling average that the Big Ten threshold that we all know about is. They didn't have that. They didn't have it. They decided to cancel a game because their 3 quarterbacks were out. I'm all for player safety, but and that's a fine decision for them to do that. I respect that decision. I support that decision, but shouldn't it be a win for Nebraska? I know, Michigan fans aren't the biggest fans of Nebraska fans, but I'm with them on their logic here at the very least.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a technicality on this one, but you make a really good point, and it seems like Wisconsin is simply forfeiting and that it should be a win for Nebraska. I don't have the same animosity toward Nebraska that a lot of Michigan fans do, and I kind of feel for them in this situation. They wanted to play Chattanooga on Saturday as a makeup game, and the Big Ten blocked it. I don't know why the Big Ten's blocking it. I think the Big Ten is making and has been for a while over these past several months. So it seems like they have an axe to grind with Nebraska because of how outspoken Scott Frost and a lot of these Nebraska players were with the way they sued the Big Ten, and they're taking it out on the Cornhuskers, and that's an absolute atrocity. And I think the Big Ten needs to take a step back and let this game happen against Chattanooga on Saturday.
Yeah, I was over on the Nebraska message board yesterday after that decision just to see where their head was at. And it was exactly the same as what I thought. And then I searched Wisconsin forfeit on Twitter, and it was like a tweet every 30 seconds from Nebraska fans saying it should be a forfeit. And I agreed with them. I tweeted about it too, that I thought it should have been a forfeit. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with Wisconsin. They're pausing football activities for 7 days. That was as of Wednesday. So they play Purdue at home next weekend. And then, of course, they're set to come to Michigan. I think they'll be back and ready to go for the Michigan game. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Wisconsin. You need 6 games in the Big Ten to be eligible to win your division and then subsequently win the Big Ten. So keep an eye on Wisconsin as things move forward. But let's talk about some of the games that are going to happen this weekend. First of all, Michigan State on Fox at noon. So that'll be the one that everyone here is going to be watching. But also at noon, Purdue and Illinois. Purdue picking up a huge win against Iowa last week. Purdue is 7-point favorites in Champaign. Illinois coming off of a big loss to Wisconsin, who looked better than advertised. I picked Illinois to cover that game and keep it, within 3 touchdowns. But man, it was a Wisconsin coming out party, and that's why I think so many Badger fans are disappointed right now that they had a pause in their quarterback, who looked so good. Graham Mertz is out for a little bit here.
Yeah, that was really a dominant win by Wisconsin last Friday night over Illinois, and Illinois looked terrible, specifically fifth-year senior quarterback Brandon Peters had an awful game. So I really don't know what to make of this Purdue-Illinois game. I know Purdue got that nice win over Iowa on Saturday, an absolute nail-biter. Aiden O'Connell started at quarterback, which I think surprised a lot of people. Jeff Brom missed the game, their head coach. I'm not sure if he's going to be back or not for this one, but I really can't get a read on this one. Purdue's favored by 7. I think that line is too high. I think it's toss-up, and I'm going to pick Illinois to cover that spread. I don't know if they're going to win or not, but I would be surprised if Purdue won this one by 7 or more.
Okay, I actually do have Purdue winning this one by 8 or more, covering the 7, and what they have Jeff Brom back, right?
I believe so, though I haven't seen if that's official yet or not.
Okay, it just pained him to not be out there. We talked about it last week. He's the guy who, when he was a quarterback in the XFL, he had got a concussion. They asked him, why'd you come back in? And he said, is this or is this not the XFL? Yes. Do I or do I not have a pulse? So it pained him to not be out there when he just had a little virus. That's what he's thinking. But good that Jeff Brom's feeling good and he'll be back, it sounds like, based on your news, Austin, your reporting. So I'll trust you on that.
My fake news that has no credibility whatsoever.
Fake news. 3:30 game, Indiana, Rutgers. Indiana with a big win over Penn State, a wild game. Scoring at the end, Michael Penix getting the 2-point conversion in overtime for the win. He got in, by the way. It was a good call. I'm glad they made that call. I thought the ball crossed the plane before it hit out of bounds, but that's for another podcast. Indiana, 10.5-point favorites over Rutgers, who impressed last week at Michigan State. I am really, really torn on this one. I kind of want to take Rutgers. I think I'm going to take them plus 10.5 here with my pick.
That point spread is way too high. This game isn't quite a toss-up, but it's not far from it. Rutgers is riding that momentum of their big win over MSU, and I really would not be surprised one bit if they win this one. This kind of would feel like a typical Indiana game where they pick up a quality win and then fall flat the following week. But this Indiana program seems to have turned a corner a little bit under Tom Allen. We really don't know that much about Rutgers yet with Greg Schiano in his first year as head coach. Maybe they are significantly better than we think, but either way, this is going to be a very tight one in Piscataway on Saturday, and I think Indiana wins a very close one, I'll say by 7 points.
It's kind of scary now that we both just took Rutgers, though. Now it's going to be like a blowout for Indiana.
Yeah, that would not surprise me one bit. Whatever we say, people just expect the opposite to happen.
Well, and the fact that we're picking Rutgers in something, an athletic competition.
2020, baby. That just shows you how weird this year has been.
True. It's a good point. 3:30 as well over on ESPN. Northwestern at Iowa. We talked about Iowa losing to Purdue last week. They're 2.5-point favorites against Northwestern, who blew Maryland out in a game that I had right as well. I think you did too. I think you didn't. Not to really bring up last week because we don't really keep track of the records here, but I will go with Northwestern Wildcats. I'm going to roll with them. Iowa just seems to be in a ton of turmoil, and Purdue just beating them. I'll go with Northwestern to win this game outright.
Northwestern, in my opinion, was the second most impressive team of week 1 last week behind Michigan. The way they absolutely dominated Maryland. They beat them by 40 points. I know Maryland isn't good, but either was Northwestern last year. So I think that shows that they really turned a corner and are kind of getting back to the kind of football that we've gotten used to seeing under Pat Fitzgerald when they do win 8, 9, or even 10 games a year. With that being said, I'm picking Iowa, man. The game is in Iowa City. That is a very, very tough place to win, regardless of whether or not there will be fans in this one. Iowa obviously lost that nail-biter at Purdue last week. They're breaking in a new quarterback and Spencer Petras, but they have one of the best young running backs in the Big Ten, and Tyler Goodson as a sophomore, 2 veteran receivers, Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith, both seniors. I'm picking Iowa, and they're only favored by 2.5. I think that point spread is way too low. I've got Iowa by 10 in this one.
Wow. Okay. There we go. And then the primetime game, this will be the last game we pick. We'll do some more games throughout the country as the year goes on, but this is really the game of the night and really the game of the week across college football, and there's not too many other ones that compete with it. So it's funny, the Big Ten comes back, and it's like the only marquee games are in the Big Ten these days. Ohio State at Penn State. Ohio State 12-point favorites. I would pick them as 21-point favorites. I don't think Penn State looked overly good, even though they probably should have won that game against Indiana with a questionable decision by James Franklin not to kneel at the end. Give me Ohio State by like 28 or something like that. I'd pick them if it was a 20-point spread.
Wow, okay. We disagree quite a bit on this one. I've got Ohio State winning too, but I think this is going to be a fairly tight game. I've got Ohio State winning by 14. This is still a quality Penn State team, in my opinion, even though they did lose to Indiana last week. What a shame that we aren't going to have the usual whiteout atmosphere at Nittany Lion Stadium. I've never had the luxury of going to one, but everybody who's been there says it's easily one of the top 2 or 3 environments in all of college football, a night whiteout that is, if not the best. So again, that's going to play a huge factor, not having that element. Ohio State really didn't impress for a lot of that first half. Last week against Nebraska, their defense especially struggled at times. So I think Penn State hangs around in this one. It's hard to envision them actually winning, but I've got Ohio State winning by 14 when it's all said and done.
All right, so you got them, both got them covering, just different ways. I got them big, and you got them fairly big, 2 touchdowns. So that'll be the game of the night, but the game of the day for us here in the state of Michigan. Michigan against Michigan State. Michigan 24.5-point favorites, over under at 52. So I only have the 3 over-unders for you. We'll cap off the show with these that I'll throw at you. Austin will make our picks. We'll start with that over-under total, 52 points in Michigan against Michigan State total points.
I'm going under, barely. I think that it's going to be very, very close to that 52-point over-under total, but I'm going slightly under.
Okay, and then I will go over on that. I actually already, like I said, I already put my pick in to our colleague Chris Ballas, and the total is over that amount of points. So we'll see what happens there. Already at odds. And then the next one, Joe Milton, over under 4.5 total touchdowns, passing, rushing. I don't know if there's any other way to get a touchdown, but maybe returning if he's out there, but 4.5 total touchdowns.
Receiving, with Jack. Yeah, I don't think that's out of the question. Someone else throwing a touchdown pass to him. We saw that a little bit, that creativity with McCaffrey and Patterson when they were on the field together. I'm going under. He obviously threw 1 touchdown last week and rushed for 1 as well. So I think he's going to have an outstanding game on Saturday, but 4.5's a lot. So I got to go under on that total.
He almost should have had 3, though, when you think about it, passing touchdowns, and then he had a rushing. Ronnie Bell stumbling, and then Eric All not catching that ball. He would have walked into the end zone. I think this is close. That's why I said it there. I'm torn. I kind of want to go with 5 because I think he might rush for 2. I feel like they're going to get down to the goal line and let Joe Milton punch it in. I'm going to go under with 4, though. I think that Joe Milton's going to have a heck of a day against Michigan State. They'll be able to use him in a bunch of different ways, just like they did last week, and maybe we'll see a deep ball or 2 that Michigan hits on in this game. So we'll see there. But 4.5, I think, was set probably a little high, and I'd go with 4, and even that might be a little high. 2.5 Michigan State turnovers. This is the last one here to send everybody off on their Michigan State weekend. By the way, haven't heard much out of Michigan State fans this week, so it doesn't really feel like the same as normal. 2.5 Michigan State turnovers.
Under. I'm going under. I think they finish with 2. I think Mel Tucker gets that aspect of the team cleaned up. I can't imagine what practice is like for them this week in terms of ball security, so I'm going under. I think Michigan forces 2. We saw it a lot during the Mark D'Antonio years. If MSU was really struggling with an aspect of their team leading into that Michigan game, they usually cleaned it up by the time the Michigan game rolled around. I know that Mel Tucker isn't quite the same caliber of coach that D'Antonio was, but I'm going to go slightly under on the 2.5 turnover total.
Okay, I actually have the over there. I think it'll be 3 or 4. I mentioned it earlier, but if Michigan really stuffs that run game, then I think Rocky Lombardi's going to be put in some bad spots. We've seen him throw a lot of picks over his career, and I think he's going to throw 3 or 4. I'll just say that there'll be 3 or 4 total turnovers, and possibly a fumble or 2. They had those issues last week. I saw a tweet. They're working on the ball security. There's a bunch of pictures of running backs and receivers running ball security drills with guys trying to strip it out. I don't know how much that really works after a game like that. It'd be an anomaly if they were to do it again, but I'm going to go with Michigan State coughing it up or throwing picks to the total amount of 3 or 4 in the over 2.5. But Austin Fox, Michigan State week. How excited are you here as we end the show?
It's a fun week, man. I think a lot of Michigan fans look forward to it every year. As Jim Harbaugh said, it's the state championship. You get bragging rights if you lose this game, which unfortunately Michigan fans experienced a lot from 2008 to 2015. You really never hear the end of it, especially from a fan base as annoying as the MSU fan base is, if we're putting it honestly. So I'm glad that the Jim Harbaugh has changed the tide of this rivalry and really swung things back to the way they should be, with Michigan being the superior program and expecting a dominant win like we were so used to seeing during the Bo Schembechler and Gary Moeller and Lloyd Carr days, and the way it's been throughout so much of this rivalry's history.
There you have it. Battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy, noon on Fox at the Big House. For Clayton, Sayfie, and Austin Fox here, signing off. Head over to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code BLUE60 if you're not a subscriber right now. You get 2 months of our premium content for free. Give us a 5-star review here on iTunes, and we'll see everybody next week.